Hi, everybody. My name is Sandy Kane. I am the CEO of Real Sourcing Network, and I want to welcome you to our webinar today. We're glad that you could all be with us. I have to say at the outset that I hope that you and your colleagues, and importantly, your families, are all doing okay in this crazy environment that we're in, and coping with it and optimistic about where we're going to be in the future. Our topic today is what's ahead for marketing in 2020. And this may be the most important question that marketing leaders have faced in a really long time. As we all know, the pandemic and the actions taken to control the spread of the virus have been disrupting business operations and marketing activities since early in March here in the U.S. But as of late May, all 50 U.S. states have begun the process of reopening their economies, and there are signs that economic activity is returning. So the question for marketers now is, how should we approach marketing for the rest of this year? And of course, one of the things we have to take into consideration as we think about that is, with all the reports we are hearing about new cases in half the states in the United States, how is that going to affect the economic recovery and the reopening, and whether there will be a new pause, etc.? So all that has to be taken into consideration. To help us address these questions, I'm delighted to have 4 seasoned marketing executives with us today. All of these executives are now in the process of determining what their approaches for their companies will be to marketing over the rest of this year, so that they can provide real-world insights about how do we think through this vital issue. I'll introduce our distinguished panel in just a minute. First, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. First, just a brief introduction about RSN. We have an e-sourcing software solution for printed materials and a wide range of other marketing services, including graphic design, copywriting, web design, video production, and mailing services. We also offer a comprehensive procurement outsourcing solution for print and marketing services. All of our customers have been affected by this pandemic in one way or another, and virtually all are now in the process of deciding what their marketing will look like for the next few months. So this is an important topic for all of us. Secondly, I want to encourage you to use the Zoom chat feature or the Q&A on the bottom of your screen and ask us questions. We will respond to them as appropriate during the course of the presentation. And finally, I just want you to know that we are recording this event, and we will, after this is done, send you a link so that you can see the recording, so you don't need to take a whole bunch of detailed notes on the subject. Now, let me introduce our panel. The guy on the left, in fact, in this particular case, the only guy on the chart is me. My distinguished panel is made up of Linda Newkirchner, who's the VP of Marketing for One Dine, and if you, Linda, could tell us a little bit about One Dine and a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Absolutely. So One Dine is a restaurant technology company working with contactless dining solutions based in Plano, Texas. Relatively young company, so I was excited to join them. I came over from the brand side in January of this year. I live in Richardson, Texas. I have 4 kids, some of whom are camping here at home now that schools have closed. So yeah, it's been a great couple months.
Great. Second, I'd like to introduce Meg Travis, who's the director and a global head of marketing at Iron Mountain Entertainment Services. Meg, thanks so much for being with us. Please tell us a little bit about Iron Mountain and you.
Hi, thanks so much, Sandy. It's really, really good to be here. I run marketing globally for the entertainment services division of Iron Mountain, the global Iron Mountain that you all have seen trucks and tread bins for. The entertainment services division is highly specialized, very different division of Iron Mountain that's based in LA, London, and New York City primarily. And we are the leading media and entertainment asset archive and preservation company globally. So as I said, we do not do shredding. It's the opposite of what we do. We preserve highly treasured cultural artifacts. I've been with Iron Mountain since 2015 and have held this role with the Entertainment Services Group since last September.
Thanks, Meg. Next, we have Donna Spangler-Josephson with us. She is the Senior VP and Chief Marketing Officer at the Corner Bakery. Donna, a little bit about Corner Bakery and yourself.
Sure. I've been with Corner Bakery for almost 3 years now, this year being the most challenging, of course. Corner Bakery's got about 200 locations across 26 states. We are a bakery cafe in the bakery cafe segment. And so we serve delicious paninis, sandwiches, salad soups, and of course, a lot of really delicious baked goods as well as delicious coffee. So we've had a lot of fun during this pandemic. I am based in Dallas, but I have been quarantining in Atlanta on outside of Atlanta on Lake Lanier. So it's not been that bad.
Everything is relative. Thanks, Donna.
Yeah, that's right.
And finally, we have Stephanie Hope, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Strategic Transaction Management. Stephanie, a little bit about the company and yourself.
Sure. Strategic Transaction Management is a boutique consultancy firm. We specialize in mergers and acquisitions as well as marketing, branding, and innovation. I've been in the restaurant and retail space for over 20 years, predominantly in the restaurant area. And I'm just thrilled to be here today. I'm helping a lot of folks. It's a challenging time, and there's lots of questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Stephanie. So let's get started. Okay. The main objective of our webinar today is to talk about what marketing is likely to look like in the second half of this year, given the continuing effects of this pandemic. We want to share some of the practical ideas that we've got about how to plan effective marketing programs for the recovery phase of the coronavirus saga. Therefore, most of our conversation today is going to be forward-looking. But I think it's important to have a clear picture of where we're starting from. So before I bring our panel members into the conversation, I wanted to spend a few minutes going over how the pandemic and the economic lockdown that is be driven by it have impacted the overall economy and marketing in particular. And then after this brief review of where we stand today, our panel will share their thoughts about marketing in the second half of the year, including what business conditions might look like, how marketing and advertising spending is likely to change, especially compared to where we are in the second quarter, how marketing channels and tactics may change, how far in advance they are planning and committing to marketing investments, and how customer buying behaviors have changed, and which of these changes will last and maybe for how long. Before we get started, I should mention that during the course of the webinar today, we're planning on doing a couple of polls where we're going to put something up on the screen, and those of you participating in the webinar will give us your opinion in response to that, and then we'll share the responses a few minutes after we've done it. So whenever Brandon is ready with the first one, you'll let me know, Brandon, right? Oh, how about that for quick timing? So the first poll is, the question is, did COVID significantly alter your company's 2020 marketing plans or budget? Answer yes, no, or you're not sure. So if you would vote on that by just clicking the button on your screen, and we'll get back to you with the answers in a little bit. Okay? So, do we still need that on the screen, Brandon?
Yeah, it runs until we get enough responses, and then I'll close it out, and then I'll share the results.
Okay. Anyway, whoops. All right. So, let's start with the real GDP in the economy. I think all of us know that the economy went into a nosedive in March and April. Unless you've been sleeping for the last 3 months, can't help but have noticed it. And this has happened, of course, as states all over the country closed many types of businesses and issued stay-at-home orders to citizens. In effect, we basically shut down a major portion of the U.S. economy to slow the spread of the virus, and the economic repercussions were inevitable. In general, the economic data and most forecasts showed the beginning of an economic downturn in the first quarter and then a big fall off in the second quarter of this year. However, many economists also think that the economy is going to begin to recover in the third quarter. What I'm showing here on this chart is the latest forecast for real GDP growth made by the Congressional Budget Office. They are predicting that in the second quarter that we're almost done with now, real GDP will have shrunk almost 38% on an annualized basis. That's after a 5% decline on an annualized basis in the first quarter. But they're also predicting that real GDP will grow back by 21% in the third quarter and another 10% in the fourth quarter. Not back to where we were at the beginning of the year, but making progress. Of course, this is going to depend a lot on what actually happens because of all these new cases that we're seeing. So none of that is yet taken into account in the charts that you see or the data that you see on this chart. Okay. In terms of consumer spending, you see a similar pattern. In this case, the Budget Office economists are forecasting that consumer spending will fall by almost 12% in the second quarter and then grow by 8% and then 2.5% in the fourth quarter. And by the way, these are not annualized percentages. They're actually quarter-over-quarter changes. So it's pretty significant if that actually occurs in that regard. Finally, from an economic standpoint, unemployment. So the overall health of the economy is the unemployment rate, and the Congressional Budget Office is less optimistic about a recovery in unemployment than it is about recovery in GDP growth and consumer spending. They're projecting an unemployment rate will be 15% in the second quarter. When we account June in with the numbers we've already seen, and then increase to almost 16% in the third quarter. For some reason, the CBO report didn't provide a forecast for the fourth quarter, but they did indicate that the unemployment rate would begin falling after the third quarter and could reach down below 9% by the fourth quarter of next year. So we're looking at an improvement, but a slow improvement in their forecasts over the course of the next 16 months or so. Now, I need to point out that many economists are more optimistic about the unemployment picture than the GBO is. For example, in an April survey of 45 economists by the National Association for Business Economics, the average forecast for U.S. unemployment rate was 12% in the second quarter, 10.5% in the third quarter, and 9.5% in the fourth quarter. So to summarize that, most economists are predicting that the U.S. economy fell into a recession in the first quarter and that the performance of the economy in the second quarter will be nothing short of horrible. And most economists also think the economy will be in a pretty strong recovery in the third quarter that will continue throughout the second half of the year. Of course, this view depends on not having any major setbacks with the pandemic. And of course, we're already seeing in the news that there's a lot of setbacks in a lot of states, and it remains to be seen just what those things will do to affect the numbers going forward. Now let's talk a little bit about marketing in particular. The pandemic has also taken a major toll on the marketing activities of most companies. Over the last 3 or 4 months, several research firms have made significant downward revisions in their estimates of advertising spending, and several consulting firms and publications have conducted surveys to gauge the impact of the pandemic on marketing and marketers. On this slide, I put together a few examples of these spending estimates and survey results. For example, WARC estimates that global advertising spending will drop by 8% this year, and eMarketer is forecasting that U.S. TV advertising spending is going to decline between 22 and 29% in the first half of this year. In an April survey of advertisers by Advertiser Perceptions, 42% of the respondents said that they have stopped all new advertising until later sometime this year. In a survey of UK marketers by eConsultancy and Marketing Week, about 90% of the respondents said that their budget commitments have been delayed or are under review. But the research also shows some optimism for the future. For example, in the Advertiser Perception Survey, 52% of the respondents said they expect to increase advertising spending beginning in the third quarter. So let's bring in the panel. If I stop screen sharing, I bring everybody in and increase that. Here you go. Can everybody see us on the screen now? Brandon, that working okay?
Looks good on my end.
Okay, well, that counts. Okay. So let's talk with the panel. Let's start with, the impact of the pandemic itself. With the impacts on marketing and advertising that I just described in mind, I want to, bring in the panel to the conversation and start by asking about the impact of the pandemic on their companies. And so, Meg, why don't I start with you? How has the virus affected your marketing activities and your programs over the last 3 months? And what actions, if any, did you take to respond to the business impacts of the virus?
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. I'm happy to talk about that.
Well, maybe not happy, but you will.
Well, when you hear the story, you might feel a little bit differently. I mean, we are in a bit of a unique situation at Iron Mountain Entertainment Services. We are primarily B2B, and our customers are entertainment consumers. So just like every company, when I think it was March 13th, as my senior in high school who just graduated said it was the most epic senior skip day ever, because it was the very last day of school ever that they had planned to be their senior skip day. But since March 13th, when Massachusetts, which is where Iron Mountain is headquartered, locked down, Iron Mountain corporate said, okay, freeze on everything. We got to figure out what's going on. But in fact, Iron Mountain was designated an essential business because many of our customers are government customers and health services. And in fact, the entertainment industry, after some back and forth, was then designated an essential service as well. So we found ourselves in a situation where our customers were continuing to work. However, there's no new content being created during this time. We at Entertainment Services are in a very unique position where we hold all of the archives for all of the older content, the music, the older shows, the older games, the films that in many cases had never been digitized. So they had never seen the light of day. And as we all know, as consumers stuck in our houses consuming masses of streaming content, the entertainment companies were all looking for ways to generate fresh content for their consumers. So in fact, it turned out about 4 weeks into the pandemic that we found ourselves in a situation where in fact we were seeing an increased bump in demand. So one thing we did have to do was really scramble to find safe ways to work. So many of our services are delivered by people who have to be in offices. They have to be in studios digitizing work, and they have to sit side by side on shared machines. And so we very quickly had to figure out how to triple shift, how to create social distance, how to create cleaning processes and procedures that were going to protect everyone. And we have been able to continue to work during this time, which has been great not only for us, but also for our customers, because our customers are able to deliver the content to consumers that the consumers want. Of course, with marketing, when the pandemic first hit, and before we understood that we were going to see sustained demand for our services, and in some cases even increased demand, we pulled back on everything. We had been in the middle of several big projects. We were coming into the pandemic with really on a very strong growth trajectory, and we were incredibly disappointed, as everyone else has been, about the immediate stoppage that we had to take. But it gave us the opportunity to take a step back and say, hey, actually, we have some marketing fundamentals that, because we've been on such a strong growth trajectory, we've never addressed. So we've never had a real website. We still don't have one. Keeping my fingers crossed it's going to go live in the next month or so. But we've taken the time to sort of regroup and do that, get our customer list together, which is something we've never had before, really establish ourselves on social media and establish a social media strategy. So it's sort of marketing 101 things that the pandemic has given us time to focus on. The other thing, of course, that is really important for us from a strategic perspective is attending in-person events. So entertainment industry events, which of course were all shut down as soon as the pandemic became official. And one thing we have definitely done is said, okay, well, the content that we were going to present at those events, that we were going to share with clients on one-to-one basis, there's a way that we can repurpose that online in the same way that we're doing here. And so we just had our first industry forum 2 weeks ago, which I'm really happy to say, we planned the content well. It was received incredibly well by our customers, and we've already had a couple of projects move forward as a result of it. So we've been incredibly fortunate that although we had to pivot, it's been a pivot in a really productive direction for us.
Thanks, Meg. That's great news. Donna, same kind of question for you, in terms of how your activity has been affected over the last 3 months and how have you responded?
Yeah, so restaurant business has been hit pretty hard by the virus and the pandemic. So we started very quickly, and that date, March 13th, also is emblazoned in my brain. We started to see a decline in sales, I think, the week prior. We said, how bad do we think this is going to get? And within 2 weeks, it showed us. So we very quickly went into a limited menus program to help stave off the decline in sales and make it so that we weren't wasting food. But that quickly turned to contactless delivery, which quickly just ended up being, hey, we're going to almost close 100% of these restaurants. So, and furlough most of the corporate staff. So there's been a crisis team of about 20, some franchisees staying open. Fast forward through the pandemic, we have been supporting those franchisees that did stay open with just a small team. So we've learned how to do things really quickly, which has been one of the best parts of this. And now that we're beginning to reopen, it is putting some things in place. And it's interesting to hear what you said, Meg, about getting some things done. We've done some things technology-wise that even though we're busy and a smaller team, we've been able to get some things done, which has been kind of interesting and fun. And put some new processes and things in place that before we just couldn't seem to do, or there were too many hurdles to get done. So we've made lots and lots of changes, lots of pivots. Now we're reopening, and we are probably out of 200, we're only at about 54 restaurants that are even open yet today. That's because Corner Bakery is based in a lot of metro and urban locations that, quite frankly, are just now starting to allow dine-in. And even though we have curbside and delivery, the dine-in is the heart of our business. So sure. It has been a big challenge, and it has been fun. That's the wrong word. It has not been fun. It has been great to see how people have come together to make massive changes in order to support how consumers have changed and what they need during this time frame.
Of course, my experience in the past is always that, if you can learn something from this kind of thing, then and use it in the future, then we will have gotten something out of it, no matter how horrible it's been. Yes. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about the future in terms of, your view of what business conditions are likely to be for your company in the second half of the year. And in that regard, whether you're generally optimistic or pessimistic. Linda, what about you?
Yeah, so a little bit like Meg, I work on a supply side. And so for us, the outlook is not as grim as it may be for some of the brands. And I'll tell you why. I think we're seeing two things happen. One of them is, necessity is the mother of invention. And what this has done is accelerate the path to more digital and mobile and customized experiences that the restaurant industry was already heading down. So this has probably accelerated it by 10 years or so, and things will be out there quicker than they were before. But I think that those, at the end of the day, are going to be positives for the industry, both from the brand and the supplier side. I think the thing that was a surprise and that threw a wrench in that is, labor efficiencies. And, if you understand restaurants, you know that the unit economics that are required for a restaurant to be profitable have been flipped on their head now.
Sure.
So it's going to take additional labor to do things like man what used to be self-service drink stations, or, just provide some of the same services that were being provided before. So, I think at the end of the day, the brands that do well supporting both those convenience-driven solutions as well as, adopt a labor-efficient model and stay top of mind are actually going to come out really well at the end of this year.
Donna, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm optimistic by nature. So it's been hard to stay that way during massive closures. But you've got to believe people have some pent up demand. I mean, as we've started to reopen the cafes across the country, and we've really seen some good stories. I do agree with what Linda was saying. The convenience factor, when you're adding that in, we have just a handful of drive-thrus at Corner Bakery. Then they remained open through the entire we're not through it yet, but through the pandemic. And they've seen actually really good results. For the rest of us, rest of the cafes, they're gonna take some time. The convenience measures are there, but again, people they go back to that experience. And so I think we're gonna have to make some significant changes, and we are as we are opening. But I'm very hopeful for the future.
Relative to being hopeful for the future, let me just ask each of you what you expect your marketing and advertising spending to be, either for yourselves or in one case your clients, as you change during the second half of this year compared to what you did or see in the first half of the year. Meg, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, my marketing budget had been backloaded towards the second half anyway, and I expect that given the sales trajectory, it will probably increase even beyond what, it was a small budget to begin with, let's be fair, but it will probably increase even beyond what I had to work with in the second half, which is, again, I'm cautiously optimistic about that.
Great. Yeah. Steph?
Yes, one of my clients is a boutique fitness firm, and they, of course, had to shut down for a period of time. So we had to reassess the entire business model. So we completely revamped the business model. So the back half of the year, we're really going to, once we want to keep our current customers, but then message out that we have this new offering that's much more economically viable for more people. So we'll be having up our spend in the second half for sure.
Great. Donna?
Well, first and second quarter were low spend month for us anyway, and then being closed, we're based, our marketing budget is all on an accrual of sales basis. So when cafes are closed, there's no sales, so there's no marketing budget coming in. So, but with that said, we are not a large national advertiser. Most of our marketing is done digitally and through our own database. And so we will be, and we are starting to spend more now as we reopen.
And Linda, what about you?
Yeah, so I know we're going to talk a little bit later about events, and as a B2B technology company, a large portion of our marketing budget was attending conferences and sponsorships, and so obviously that's, just naturally been reduced for us. We have shifted to more digital email, those types of things. That's a little bit harder with B2B because you can't target as specifically as you might be if you were reaching out to a consumer. So just by nature, our budget has been cut based on the availability of the channels that we have to market to. So I would expect that'll stay this way through the end of this year, and then pick up to normal levels next year, hopefully.
Picking up on that, how do you guys anticipate making any, or do you see any significant changes being made in the marketing channels or tactics you're going to be using over the next few months compared to what you've been doing or were doing before the pandemic? Stephanie, what do you think?
I'd call it a heavy shift, moving into digital and social just much more aggressively. We're working on a grassroots influencer network and campaign, because we have this new streaming offering that we really would like to promote. And for this fitness space, the trust factor, the word of mouth is the most powerful model that we can use. That would be the lever that will pull the most, but really heavily keeping top of mind with our consumers and our members.
Linda, do you want to expand a little bit about the shift in the channels that you were talking about?
Yeah, I think for starters, when we talk about who we're going after and whether you're B2B or B2C, this has shifted significantly. If you see the polls that are coming out about consumer behavior, there are people that are planning to make deep cuts, people that are planning to hibernate and spend. It's always categorized differently, but basically across the board, consumers are saying that they're going to stay the course in the numbers of about 25 or 26%. So right off the bat, your whole base that you're marketing to, your target market, your existing customer doesn't exist like they did before, right? So that in itself is going to cause a shift. But I think, I think what Steph said about shifting to digital, we're seeing a lot of that. Obviously for months out of home was just non-existent because nobody was leaving their house. And digital was ramped up because everybody was on their phones and OTT with streaming Netflix and all that. But I think the thing we also need to remember is we've seen and will continue to see a big shift in the messaging. It's very much gone from a product-focused message to a public-focused message. So, people aren't really interested in the product as much as they are, what is the value proposition of the brand and how are you helping your community? And the merchants that double down on that, I think, are going to be the ones that are shifting successfully.
Right. One area, as we talk about this, do you see over the next 6 months that you're going to be spending most of your attention on existing customers or trying to, bring in, new acquisition of clients? Meg, your thoughts?
Yeah, the majority of our customer base is we're in a small number. We have a very small number of customers who give us the majority of our business. Those are the large entertainment companies, the studios, the labels, the broadcasters. And in order to really grow this business, we absolutely have to be focusing on new customer acquisition. So that was actually a natural shift for us anyway, as we sort of moved into a new phase of our growth. So I would say it hasn't just been the pandemic that's caused that shift. Because we're lucky enough to have that stable customer demand, and that so we will be moving into growth in customer acquisition. But again, if the pandemic had not hit, if we had not been pulling back on events, we probably would not be moving so quickly into social and search as we are now.
Okay. Linda, comment you made has prompted a question about the shift that you're talking about in terms of whether that shift is B2B or B2C as you looked at it.
I was specifically with the poll talking about B2C and how your existing customer in the way that you looked at them before doesn't exist. I do think that there's shifts in B2B as well, especially when you go back to what we talked about with the acceleration of some of the new products and the convenience-driven solutions that are being ushered in by the changes brought about from the pandemic.
Okay. All right, now let's talk a little bit about customer behavior and what's changed. It's obvious that, changes have taken place in customer buying behaviors over the last, couple of months. For example, in their first quarter earnings report, Walmart said that its e-commerce sales grew by 74% during that quarter. So I have a number of related kinds of questions. First is, have you seen any major changes in the buying behaviors of your customers over the last 2 or 3 months? And do you think any of these changes will persist going forward for the next few months and even after this pandemic is behind us? And if so, will these long-lasting changes require you to change your strategies for marketing or tactics, etc.? Stephanie, your thoughts?
Absolutely. Being in the fitness business, we literally had to close down, but quickly pivoted to doing streaming services for all our memberships. That we offered a free service, so even if you were not a member of our services, you could watch them online. There's a good, to Linda's point, there's a good point of our population that is at risk. So until there's a vaccine, they are not going to be coming back into our studios. So we now need to keep that online streaming services going as an option for membership to retain that customer. And then huge precautions, sanitization, health care issues with coming into a studio. So we've really changed our entire model: safety, mask wearing, staying on the mat. And that's not going to go away until really a vaccine is. And this new norm is here to stay for the fitness industry. It's a real challenge, but people do want to still stay healthy.
Yeah. Sounds good. Meg, your thoughts?
Yeah, so consumer behavior of the increased consumption of streaming content obviously is driving our customers to continue to go into their archives for that fresh content because production is still slow. I mean, the movie studio lots are just opening now, and they're having to do it incredibly carefully in order to make sure that everyone gets to work safely. So we'll be responding to our customers with this increased demand for access to their archives and digitization of their archives. I think sorry, it just went out of my head, the point that I was going to make. I lost it. Sorry, I lost that train. Maybe it'll come back someday.
Don't feel bad. That happens a lot. I rarely know what day it is.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem. Donna, you want to add something to that?
Sure. I mean, we've seen a lot of change in consumer behavior.
I thought you were going to tell her what she forgot.
Okay. That would have been great.
Yeah. Well, if you think about restaurants and everybody quarantining, working from home, breakfast day part was a big day part for us. You saw McDonald's took away their all-day breakfast. We've really been hit in the breakfast day part, even at reopening. So consumers' behavior has shifted. One, when they're eating with us, when they are dining with us, whether it's online, pickup, curbside, or coming into the cafes now. I mean, it's not as, the breakfast during the weekday is not as heavy as it used to be. And I think that shift's going to continue for a long time as people are going to continue to work from home. Family meals, people looking for value. I think that was mentioned a little earlier by Linda, and definitely we've put some things out there so that it makes it easier for families to work with us through the convenience of delivery with family meal options that are already put out there. Those are going to stay. Looking at more kids programming as families are spending more time together and working with children at home. I work with someone who suddenly, during this pandemic, not only was she a creative, one of our artists, but then suddenly she was also a kindergarten teacher to her son, and she was also the nanny because he wasn't going after kindergarten to that. So parents are needing the convenience, and I think that whether or not school changes, and they go back to school, I think some of these things are going to stick. Because we see consumers saying that they're thankful that they've had the slowdown to spend time with their family. And so I think some of those values have been reinstilled, and they're going to look for experiences in restaurants and in dining along those same lines. So,
right.
Yeah.
Steph just had a comment from one of our participants that said that her gym's not open yet and didn't know if it would be at all this year.
That's pretty common. I mean, you've got Gold gyms and 24-hour fitness going chapter 11. I mean, it's It takes a lot of discipline and a lot of work to really make sure that you keep your members safe. And it requires extra labor, extra equipment, and all sorts of things to really keep your members safe. So, Sarah, I hope it opens up soon and that they find what they need to get those doors open.
Yeah.
All right, let's switch gears again and talk a little bit about competition. And the question is, do you foresee any substantial changes to the competitive landscape as a result of this pandemic? And have any of your major competitors become any significantly stronger or weaker as you've seen it over the last 3-4 months? And are you already facing, or do you think you'll be facing, any new competitors? Linda?
Yes to all of those things. What we've seen in the restaurant technology space is kind of a mixed bag. So there's been some of our competitors that have very famously laid off a lot of people and closed their doors. When you think about people that produced high-touch items like kiosks or tabletop ordering devices, there's just not going to be a place for those things anymore. By the same token, we've seen a lot of people that work in our space pivot and come up with, there's obviously a big market now for the contactless solutions, whether it's mobile menu browsing, ordering, payment, getting on a wait list. And, I was reading an article earlier today about just the prevalence of API technology and how that's allowed people to very quickly onboard some of these solutions. I did hear an estimate from the NRA that at their big show in Chicago next year, they think that the technology pavilion will be about half the size that it has been in previous years, just because of the number of technology providers that aren't going to survive the pandemic.
Yeah, it's also taking, one of the things that's interesting is we've found, with our expertise in printing and handling marketing services kinds of things, we've had a significant call from various companies helping them with disposable menus, because it's so critical and they never thought about it before, but we're doing it for them on that basis. So, you kind of see that. Steph, did you want to add something on the competitive side?
Sure. Again, it's been to our benefit because the bigger houses are facing some financial tailwinds, so to speak. With our model, we really have close relationships with our members, and having that emotional connection with the member in a functional fitness arena really allowed us to maintain and keep our membership solid during this pandemic. And in fact, we expect it to grow given the situation of people wanting to feel safe, taking the time to be one of those gyms that is actually open and committed to the health and safety of its membership first and foremost. We do need to prioritize our members and then who we market to, because again, there's going to be a portion that are not going to be stepping foot in the studio for a very long time. What do we do for them versus the avid user? So right. We're doing a lot of work on our customer segmentation as well to maintain that competitive edge.
Okay. Let's talk about events. We all loved going to those things, whatever the purpose was. But virtually, all of the trade shows, conferences, and any other in-person marketing events have now been canceled for, if not the next quarters, most of them even for the rest of 2020. So again, I've got a few related questions. Number one is, how important are in-person events to your company's marketing efforts? And if in-person events are an important part, how are you adapting to the absence of these? And what do you think the event landscape will look in the first half of next year? Linda, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I actually have an interesting perspective on this because in addition to being a supplier, I am the co-chair of the Marketing Executives Group, which actually puts on our own event every year. So, from the vendor side, we anticipate getting thousands of leads in a year at events. And so it's been really, and I mentioned earlier, difficult to replace that. As I said, we've switched to digital email. We've been doing webinars. We've been doing paid targeted ads. Fortunately for us, because we're well positioned and we are in that space where we provide contactless dining solutions and menu browsing and everything, we've been fortunate that we've had some people coming to us that are looking for a solution. So that's been beneficial. From the side of somebody who plans an event, it's the same thing. You don't want to go a year without connecting with the people that normally attend your event. And so we've been trying to do some online social events, getting some of the people who were slotted to speak at our event to do a webinar or an hour-long, presentation for us that people can stream. Everything that we're hearing is that even though, events might come back next year, budgets are going to be limited. I think it's going to take a while to really recover from the lack of being able to attend in-person events.
Okay. And Donna, you or Meg have any thoughts you want to add to that?
I'll just say we love the NRA show, love Meg. So there's all kinds of events that we go to throughout the year. We don't really sell our product necessarily at events, although we do a lot of catering where we do events and we do some pop-ups and things like that. But we're not even allowing people in our test kitchen right now. So definitely won't be attending events, I think, for quite a while.
Along those lines, the one thing that none of you mentioned in response to this question was the last part. What do you think the landscape's going to look like? Obviously, you don't have a crystal ball any better than anybody else's, but what do you think it's going to look like in the first half of next year?
Quiet.
From my perspective, all of our key events were canceled as well. We have always used them as ways to talk one-on-one with clients and potential clients, to share our thought leadership, to share, issues and challenges, because we do see our role in sort of bringing a role in the industry of bringing our customers together to talk about these archival issues, which everyone faces. And the pandemic is only one archival issue that people face. Climate change is another really big one, and that will continue to be an issue, obviously, for the foreseeable future, if not the forever future. So the challenge for us is how do we continue to solidify those client relationships without that in-person attendance? And I think what we found, one thing is we're certainly spending more on merchandise. We are really thinking through really cool giveaways that we're sending to our clients and prospects sort of in advance of a meeting, and we'll sit down and say, hey, we're trying to support the restaurant industry as well. We'll send them a restaurant gift certificate for a local restaurant and invite them to have lunch with us with their new branded tumblers that we've sent them. So we're trying to find other ways to make the connection that feel fun and that feel like they're worth doing for the person who is spending all of their time on Zoom, just like we all are. So, why do you want to have one more Zoom call? Well, we're trying to make it fun.
Well, it's interesting. Only in the last month, we've gotten involved through a relationship we have of providing promotional items for people to give away at virtual meetings, which, in the past you might not have thought made any sense, but in this environment it does, and it looks like something that may be significant, and we're happy to provide that help any way we can from that standpoint. Popped up on our screen are the results of the poll we took a little while ago. Not surprisingly, in response to the question about whether or not the virus significantly altered your company's 2020 marketing plans, out of 20 people, 18 said yes, or 90%. We got one no, I wonder who they are, and one I'm not sure from that standpoint. So not surprising response to that question. Okay, from that standpoint. Okay, last subject I want to talk about is the whole idea of remote working. Because of the virus, many marketing teams, as well as a whole bunch of other people, have been required to work remotely. So a number of related questions in terms of, is some or all of your marketing team working remotely? If so, how has productivity of the marketing team been affected by that? Have you changed internal work processes or taken other steps to maintain productivity, and will you continue to use these processes after the pandemic ends? In other words, did we learn something from it? And how long do you think your marketing team will be working remotely? Linda?
So our marketing team is working remotely. Although our company is mostly centered here in Texas, though, we have a lot of employees that are geographically distributed. So that's not that unusual for us. We have one member of our marketing team in Miami, Florida. So, and then a couple of us here in the Dallas office. So I wouldn't say that the impact has been that great to us. Obviously there aren't many things marketing wise that you can't collaborate on over a Zoom meeting or through an email or a conference call. So, we don't feel like our productivity has taken a hit other than just the FaceTime that you get with the rest of the team when you're able to be in the office. As far as how long we'll do it, like I said, it's something we've done for a long time. I mean, I think a lot of us are looking forward to getting back to the office again. And as much as you hear people say, well, now that people are working from home, we don't need offices anymore. I do think there's a lot of recency bias there. And I think that people are going to want to get back to an office. They're going to want to collaborate again. They're going to want to get out of their home for any number of reasons. And
we're not going to have that discussion.
Yeah. And managers are going to want to see that productivity. So, I think that there will be certainly a bit of a shift, but I don't think that the office has come to its end.
Meg, what about you?
We have always been all remote all the time. And so just as Linda was saying, it has really not impacted us. And we also had another really happy coincidence, which is that Iron Mountain globally switched from Microsoft Office to G Suite just in the last fall. And so the collaboration tools are there. And so we've been able to really work incredibly efficiently. And so I have no complaints. I think we'll probably continue to do this as long as our team members want to.
Great. Steph, your comments?
I'd say working remotely is something that really hasn't really affected us that much because we're by nature remote. So and even the clients, a lot of their marketing teams, working remotely is just not an issue anymore with Zoom, with all the tools that we have nope, it was not a problem. Here to stay.
And finally, Donna, your thoughts?
Well, they're working remotely on the marketing side, and they're also working very lean because there's just a small crisis team. But I would say they are so much more productive, and we're working through Teams and Zoom, and we touch base every morning. Which in the past we used to do a weekly get together. Now we do a half-hour morning get together. Everybody knows everything. And we were just talking about this week about how much better it is and how we're surprised at how good we are when we're such a small little team. I will say from a culinary development perspective, it doesn't work. I mean, I cannot, I've had the chef send me a couple of things to taste and I can't do it like he does it. So that tasting table is special. So I'm looking forward to getting that tasting table back in some form or fashion. But other than that, the remote, it's actually, I think we've become more productive and really learn. So that's a positive.
I would guess that sample when it comes in the FedEx box is not quite the same as being there.
It's not even like that. He just sends me the recipe and I'm like, seriously?
Oh.
I can't do that.
That's even worse. Absolutely right.
I'm just not as good as he is. That's all I can say.
He'll be glad to hear you say that.
Yeah.
Before we close, ladies, any other comments that you'd like to add to the subject? Okay. Well, with that, I want to thank our panelists. You've been great. And I want to thank all your participation and your questions. And this has been terrific. And we'll see you again for another one of our webinars shortly. Again, thanks so much for participating. And remember, we will be sending you a link to the video that we did of this so you can have it and share it with your colleagues. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.